When my daughter Emily looked me in the eye on Christmas Eve and said, "Dad, you're toxic and we don't want you here," I simply smiled. She didn't know it, but at that moment, I made the most expensive decision of her life. 3 days later, I was in my lawyer's office altering a $2.3 million will. And that was just the beginning of my revenge. You know, I spent 28 years building a fortune thinking I was leaving a legacy for my family. I worked 12 hours a day, built a company from scratch, sacrificed myself in every way, all because I believed family was sacred. But that December night, looking at my own daughter's face as she kicked me out of the house, I understood one thing. Unconditional love is a luxury that ungrateful people don't deserve. "Dad, you've always been controlling and manipulative," she continued, with her husband Jake nodding beside her. "We need to protect our children from your negative energy." Negative energy. That was her way of describing the man who paid for her medical school, who put a down payment on the house she lived in, who financed the $80,000 wedding she wanted. There, standing at the door of the house I helped buy, watching my own grandchildren peering through the window, not understanding why Grandpa couldn't come in, I felt a strange calm. Not anger, not despair. Calm. The calm of someone who has finally seen reality. For years, I was the family's emotional ATM. When they needed money, I was the wonderful dad. When I gave my opinion on something, I became the toxic one. "Okay, Emily," I said, taking off the hat she'd given me the previous Christmas. "I understand perfectly." I left the hat on the entryway coffee table and turned. "Enjoy Christmas with your family." What she didn't know was that I'd discovered something very interesting about family. It's defined by respect, not blood. And respect was something Emily had lost a long time ago. I drove home in silence, but my mind was already working like the machine that built my company. If they wanted to cut me out of their lives, I was going to give them exactly what they wanted, but my way. The following Tuesday, I had a meeting scheduled with Thomas Mitchell, my lawyer of 15 years. The will that would guarantee Emily would inherit 60% of my assets was about to undergo the biggest overhaul in history. You won't believe what I discovered about my daughter after I started investigating, and even less how she reacted when she realized her toxic dad's money was gone forever. The house was decorated like an American Christmas magazine. Golden lights, a 4-meter tree, perfectly wrapped presents, all paid for with money I had transferred to their account over the years. But when Emily opened the door, her smile died the moment she saw my face. "Dad, what are you doing here?" The question came loaded with irritation, as if I were an unwelcome salesman ringing the doorbell at dinner time. "I thought we talked about this." Talked. Interesting choice of words to describe the phone call where she informed me that I wasn't welcome at my own family's Christmas celebration. "Emily, it's your father. It's Christmas Eve." My voice came out calmer than I felt inside. "The grandchildren are here. I thought we could resolve this misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. I still had hope that the daughter I had raised would emerge from behind this stranger who was treating me like an intruder. Jake appeared behind her, his protective hand on his wife's shoulder, as if I were some kind of threat. "Richard, Emily has already made it clear that you two need some time apart." Time apart. As if 28 years of dedication could be paused like a Netflix episode. "Maybe things will be different next year." "Different how?" I asked, genuinely curious. "What exactly needs to change for me to be accepted into my own family?" That's when Emily dropped the bombshell that would change everything between us forever. The words that made me understand I had created a stranger. "Dad, you need to accept that we're adults now. That we don't need your approval for everything. That your controlling ways and your constant comments about how we spend money, how we raise the children, how we live our lives, that's toxic. Toxic." That word was becoming her favorite catchphrase to describe anything I said. "Comments on how you spend money?" I almost laughed. "Emily, I don't comment. I ask because I'm the one paying." The truth came out harder than I intended, but I was already tired of pretending that the situation was normal. "When you spent $15,000 on a renovation of the children's room last month, I asked if it was necessary because it was my credit card that was used." The silence that followed was revealing. Jake looked at Emily with an expression I couldn't decipher. She blushed, but not from embarrassment, from anger. "And there you have it," she said, pointing her finger at me. "Always throwing money in our faces. Always making us feel indebted. That's emotional manipulation, Dad. Emotional manipulation. I stood there staring at this woman I no longer recognized. The same woman who called me crying when her husband lost his job, begging me to help with the bills. The same woman who asked me to be a guarantor for their mortgage because their income wasn't enough. The same woman who assured me they were just temporary loans. "Emily," I said, my voice still controlled. "At what point did helping my family become manipulation?" But she had already decided. In her face I saw a cold determination that made me understand something terrible. She wasn't hurt by me. She was getting rid of me. Driving home that night, I started doing something I should have done years ago. Counting every penny, every favor, every sacrifice I had made for Emily and her family over the past 10 years. The numbers that poured into my head made me nauseous. Medical school, $280,000. I sold shares in my company to pay for it without it going into debt. Education is an investment, I used to say at the time, proud to be able to give my daughter something I never had. Medical residency, another $50,000 in living expenses, because her salary didn't cover basic expenses in Boston. The wedding. My God, the wedding. Emily wanted something unforgettable. I translated, she wanted to impress her college friends and show that she had made it big in life. $80,000 in a single day. I could have bought a house with that money. But she was my only daughter, my princess. How could I refuse? Then came the grandchildren. Madison and Tyler, the two angels who melted my heart. When they were born, Emily needed to take extended leave. Jake was trying to start his own consulting firm. "Dad, it's just until things take off," she promised me. Things did take off, but the money kept leaving my account. Private school for the children, $24,000 a year each. They deserve the best, Emily argued. And I agreed. My grandchildren were going to have all the opportunities I didn't have. Piano lessons, swimming, tennis. What would a few more thousand cost to secure their future? The house. The damn house that cost $450,000. They managed to get financing for $300,000, but needed a down payment and closing costs. "Could you help us just this once, Dad?" Just this once he became guarantor for the loan when their financial situation worsened 2 years later. Annual vacations in Orlando, the Caribbean, Hawaii. "Children need to see the world," Emily explained, posting photos on Instagram of 5-star resorts, while I ate sandwiches at the office to save money. But seeing the happiness on my grandchildren's faces was worth any sacrifice. The kitchen renovation, Emily's new car, Jake's new car, the backyard pool, the deck, the new fence, the furniture, the electronics. Every month there was something. Every month I opened my heart and my wallet because it was family, because it was love. Sitting in my living room that Christmas Eve, I picked up paper and pen and started adding it all up. The final number made me understand why I'd felt so empty lately. In 10 years, I had transferred over $800,000 to Emily and Jake. $800,000 that came out of my assets to finance a life they could never have on their own. And now I was discovering that all that money had bought what? The right to be called toxic. The privilege of being excluded from my own family's Christmas. The honor of being seen as a manipulative burden by the daughter I loved more than my own life. It was there that I realized that love has an expiration date, and mine had expired a long time ago. The next morning, I woke up with a mental clarity I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't anger, it wasn't resentment, it was understanding. Understanding that I had been deceived for too long, and that it was time to see the situation as it truly was. I called my sister Carol, who had always had a complicated relationship with Emily. Carol had never been one to mince words when it came to my daughter, and I always thought it was envy. Now I was beginning to suspect it was lucidity. "Richard," Carol said when I told her what had happened, "I'm sorry for you, but I'm not surprised." Her voice had that tone of someone who had been waiting for this call for years. "Do you want to know what Emily really thinks of you?" "Carol, don't start. She called me last week. She wanted to know if I thought you were starting to show signs of senility." The word hit like a punch to the gut. "She's worried because you've been interfering too much in their lives. She asked if I thought it would be time to talk about a power of attorney to manage your finances." The world stopped. Power of attorney. Emily was planning to take control of my money, claiming I no longer had the mental capacity to manage it. The daughter I raised was trying to legally steal from me. "There's more, Richard. Jake mentioned at Tom's barbecue that you're thinking of putting you in a nursing home for your own safety. Carol paused for a long time. You're 58 years old, Richard. You're not a sick old man. You're a wealthy, healthy man who represents an obstacle to their plans. The conversation continued for another hour. Carol told me things I had refused to see. How Emily talked about me at family gatherings when I wasn't there. How she referred to my money as our inheritance, even though I was still alive. How Jake had even consulted lawyers about the best way to contest wills in cases of senile mental incapacity. They're waiting for you to die, Richard. Or worse, they're trying to push you into the abyss before your time. The truth came out of Carol's mouth like a death sentence. Emily hasn't seen you as a father for a long time. She sees you as an investment that's taking too long to pay off. I hung up the phone with the feeling that I had woken up from a 10-year dream. A dream where I believed I was being a generous father, when in reality, I was being a useful idiot. Emily wasn't worried about my mental health. She was annoyed that I was still lucid enough to question her spending habits. The exclusion from Christmas wasn't about toxicity. It was about control. It was about isolating me socially to justify what they were planning to do to me. It was about creating a narrative where I was the unstable villain, and they were the victims who needed to protect me from myself. But they made a fatal mistake. They underestimated the intelligence of the man who built a multi-million-dollar company from scratch. The man who had survived 3 economic recessions and was still standing. The man they were trying to portray as senile, but who was 3 steps ahead of their game. Because if they wanted to treat me like I was dead, I was going to give them exactly what they wanted, only in my own way. I spent the rest of that week in an eerie calm. For the first time in years, I didn't receive any calls from Emily asking for money, no messages about financial emergencies, no drama that required my wallet to resolve. The silence was revealing. On the Monday after Christmas, I was in my office organizing company documents when something clicked in my head. If Emily was really planning to declare me incapacitated, she would need evidence. She would need to show a pattern of erratic behavior, questionable financial decisions, signs of mental decline. That was why she was provoking me. Every argument we had, every time I expressed frustration with her spending, every time I questioned their decisions, it was all being used to build a case against me. Emily was gathering evidence that her father had lost control. I opened my laptop and started doing something I should have done a long time ago, investigating my own daughter. If she was playing chess, I was going to play too, but I had an advantage. 35 years of experience building and destroying businesses. Emily may be a doctor, but I'm a strategist. I started with social media. Emily's Instagram was a catalog of lies. Photos of the house that we got with great effort, the car that we worked so hard to buy, the vacation that we deserved after a difficult year. In no photo, in no caption, was there any mention of the man who had made that life possible. But what was most interesting were the comments from her friends. You are so blessed. Jake is an amazing husband. You deserve all this happiness. Emily had built a public image of a family that had succeeded in life through their own merit. I was the dirty secret that threatened that narrative. On Jake's Facebook page, I found something even more revealing. A post from 3 months ago, where he talked about the importance of breaking free from toxic relationships, even when they involve family. The comments were a lesson in how to manipulate public opinion. You're right, Jake. Toxic family is worse than any other because you feel obligated to put up with it. But the icing on the cake came when I found a private Facebook group called Dealing with Controlling Parents. Emily was an active member. Inside, she had posted about a father who uses money to manipulate family decisions and how to set boundaries with relatives who think they own your life because they help you financially. The responses were illuminating. Dozens of people advised Emily to cut off contact, to seek legal help, to protect her children from their grandfather's toxic influence. A veritable collective brainwashing where my generosity had been transformed into abuse. That's when I understood the whole game. Emily wasn't just planning to keep my money, she was building a moral justification for it. In her mind, and in the opinion of the people who mattered to her, I was the villain. She would be the heroine who broke free from her controlling father and protected her children from generational trauma. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. For 30 years I had fought competitors, weathered economic crises, survived hostile takeover attempts on my company. But I had never faced an enemy as dangerous as a daughter who knew all my weaknesses and had decided to use them against me. The difference is that Emily forgot one fundamental thing. I didn't survive in the business world by being sentimental. And now she was going to find out what it's like to face Richard the businessman, not Richard the father. On the morning of Tuesday, December 29th, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a decision that would change everything. Spread out before me, like cards in a deadly game, were all the documents proving 10 years of stupid generosity. I picked up my phone and called First National Bank, where I'd held business accounts for 20 years. I want to cancel all automatic transfers from my account to Emily and Jake Morrison's accounts, I told Jessica, my account manager. All of them, immediately. Mr. Morrison, there are several transfers. Are you sure? Some have been active for years. Jessica knew my family.
She had processed hundreds of transfers for Emily over the years. Her voice carried barely disguised curiosity. Jessica, I want you to write this down. Richard Morrison cancelled today, December 29th, 2024. All transfers to third-party accounts linked to family members. I was documenting everything. If Emily wanted to play lawyer, I was going to make her job easier. And I want you to send written confirmation to my lawyer. In 15 minutes, it was done.
The financial umbilical cord that had sustained Emily for a decade was cut. Tuition for the children's private school, cancelled. Home loan payment, cancelled. Car insurance, cancelled. The additional credit card that was in Emily's wallet, cancelled. But that was just the warm-up. I called the brokerage firm where I held an investment fund in my grandchildren's name. $150,000 that I had accumulated over the years to secure their college future. I want to withdraw everything, I told the advisor. Transfer it to my main checking account. Mr. Morrison, this fund is intended for your grandchildren. Are you sure? I was sure. If Emily thought I was too toxic to be present in their lives, then I was too toxic to finance their future as well. The third call was to Emily's home insurance company. I had prepaid her home insurance for 2 years as a Christmas present the previous year. I want to cancel the policy and receive a prorated refund, I explained. The property is no longer my responsibility. With each call I made, I felt a weight being lifted from my shoulders. For years I had carried the financial burden of an entire family. Now, for the first time in a decade, I was only worried about myself. The phone rang at 3:47 p.m. Emily. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again at 4:15. This time I answered. Dad, what's happening? The children's school payment was rejected. The bank said you canceled the automatic transfer. His voice had an urgency I hadn't heard in a long time. It was the voice of someone who had just realized the free money had run out. Emily, I said, my voice perfectly calm. You told me I'm toxic. Toxic people shouldn't have influence in children's lives. That includes financial influence. Dad, this is ridiculous. You can't just... She paused, probably realizing that I could exactly just. The children are going to have to leave the school. Not necessarily. You and Jake are competent adults with jobs. You can afford a school that fits your budget. The irony was delicious. The same daughter who had called me controlling was now discovering what it was like to take control of her own financial life. You're doing this out of revenge, she accused. You're punishing the children because of a fight between adults. Emily, I'm doing exactly what you asked. I'm leaving your lives. I paused, letting the silence carry the weight of the truth. You wanted independence. Now you have it. What followed was a series of pleas, threats, and emotional blackmail that would have worked perfectly on the Richard of a week ago. But the Richard of today had understood one fundamental thing. Respect isn't asked for. Respect is earned. And Emily had lost her right to mine a long time ago. What happened in the following days showed me exactly who I was dealing with. Emily didn't call to apologize. She didn't ask to talk. She didn't acknowledge that she had hurt me. Instead, she escalated the conflict. On Thursday, January 2nd, my phone rang at 7:30 in the morning. It was Jake, in a call that would forever change my perception of their character. Richard, we need to talk man to man, he began, using that paternalistic tone that had irritated me since the first day I met him. Emily is very hurt by your childish reaction, but I understand you're going through a difficult time. A difficult moment? I almost laughed. Jake, what difficult moment? Look, We know you're dealing with age-related issues, loneliness, mood swings, difficulty accepting that you can no longer control everything. He was reading from a script, probably something he had researched about dealing with difficult, elderly people. But punishing the children by cutting off financial support is too extreme. Jake, let me understand. You exclude me from Christmas, call me toxic, but think it's normal to keep receiving my money? My voice was rising, but I controlled myself. How does that work in your heads? Finances are one thing, relationships are another. The coldness in his voice was frightening. You may be upset with us, but the children are not to blame. Madison and Tyler depend on this financial stability that you have always provided. They depend on the stability that I've always provided. Not that their parents provided, that I provided. Jake was openly admitting that they were financially dependent on my resources, but they still thought they had the right to treat me like trash. And what's your proposal, Jake? Look, how about this? You reactivate the automatic transfers, maintain support for the children, and we give everyone some time to cool off. Maybe in the middle of the year, we can talk about supervised visits. Supervised visits. As if I were a sex offender. Supervised visits to see my own grandchildren? Richard, you have to understand our position. Emily is pregnant again. My blood ran cold. Pregnant. Emily was pregnant and hadn't told me. We can't have stress and drama during this delicate time. We need to protect our family. Our family. They had officially excluded me from the definition of family, but they wanted to keep my money as part of the package. It was genius in its cruelty. How much does she want? I asked. Emily. How much does she want to let me see my grandchildren? The question came out more bitter than I intended, but it needed to be asked. Jake was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was the voice of a negotiator who had just realized his bluff had been caught. It's not about money, Richard. It's about you accepting some healthy boundaries. Stop questioning our financial decisions. Stop giving your opinion on how we raise the children. Stop acting like you're still responsible for us. And in return, you can maintain a limited relationship with your grandchildren. Monthly visits, perhaps. A few supervised phone calls. Nothing that interferes with our family dynamic. There it was. The complete proposal. I would pay for a family that would tolerate me. I would be the ATM grandfather who showed up once a month, left money and gifts, and disappeared without question. A secondary role in the lives of my own grandchildren, financed with my own money. Jake, I said, my voice calmer than it had ever been, go fuck yourself. And I hung up. That's when I realized I wasn't dealing with a rebellious daughter or an idiot son-in-law. I was dealing with extortionists. People who had turned love into a bargaining chip and emotional blackmail into a business model. But they forgot one thing. I didn't build a $1 million fortune by being extorted by anyone. On Saturday morning, I was in my backyard watering the plants when I heard the sound of tires screeching in my driveway. 3 doors slammed shut almost simultaneously, and within seconds I saw Emily, Jake, and a woman I didn't recognize marching toward my front door. Emily didn't ring the doorbell. She banged on the door like the police do when they have a search warrant. "Dad, open this door now!" Her voice was laden with an authority she had never displayed before. I opened the door to find my daughter's face red with anger, Jake standing behind her like a bodyguard, and a blonde woman in a tailored suit holding a black briefcase as if it were a weapon. "Dad, this is Diane Richardson," Emily said, pushing her way into my house uninvited. "She's a family law specialist. We need to talk about your recent financial decisions." Diane Richardson extended her hand with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Morrison, your daughter is concerned about some behavioral patterns that may indicate cognitive decline. I'm here to help the family navigate this delicate situation." Cognitive decline? They weren't playing anymore. Emily had brought a lawyer specializing in elder incapacitation to my house on Saturday morning to evaluate me psychologically. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice low but firm. "Now." "Dad, you cut off your own granddaughter's livelihood without any rational explanation," Emily said, planting herself in my living room as if it were her own. "You're acting erratically and vindictively. These are clear signs that you need help making important decisions." Diane opened the folder and took out some papers. "Mr. Morrison, We have documentation from several instances where you have demonstrated questionable judgment recently. Sudden changes in financial behavior, hostility towards family members, paranoia about people's motivations. Paranoia? I looked at Emily. Honey, you brought a lawyer to my house to declare me incompetent, and you're talking about paranoia. Jake spoke out for the first time. Richard, nobody wants to declare you incompetent. We just want you to have the support you need to make decisions that don't harm you or your family. Support, I repeated. And what would that support look like? Diane consulted the documents. We can establish a limited power of attorney where Emily would help you manage certain financial decisions. This would protect you from making impulsive choices that could compromise your future well-being. Ah, there it was. The complete scam. They wanted me to sign a document giving Emily control over my financial decisions, justifying it by saying I was mentally capable of managing my own money. Let me get this straight, I said, sitting down in my armchair and looking at the three intruders. You think I'm too senile to decide where to spend my money, but lucid enough to sign a legal document giving you that control? Diane and Emily exchanged glances. Emily tried a different approach. Dad, you've always been generous with the family. These sudden changes in behavior aren't like you. Her voice became sweeter, almost manipulative. Maybe you're going through a depression, or maybe it's the effect of some medication. There's no shame in accepting help. Emily, I said, slowly standing up, if you don't leave my house within the next 30 seconds, I'm going to call the police and report you for trespassing. Dad, you're not thinking clearly. 20 seconds. Diane quickly closed the folder. Mr. Morrison, we don't want to create a conflict, but please consider our proposal. It's for the good of the family. 10 seconds. They left, but at the door, Emily turned around. Dad, you're making a mistake that will destroy this family forever. By the time you realize what you've done, it may be too late to fix it. When I heard their car pulling out of the driveway, I sat back down in the seat and started laughing in a way I hadn't laughed in years, because I had finally understood something fundamental. Emily wasn't worried about my sanity. She was desperate because her plan had failed. They expected me to fight, yell, make a scene, behavior that could be used to prove emotional instability. Instead, I had acted calmly and rationally. I had made financial decisions consistent with my current family situation, and that was completely ruining their case. Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. I was sitting in the office of Thomas Mitchell, my lawyer, with a folder full of documents that would change the rest of Emily's life forever. Richard, Thomas said, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the papers I had brought. Are you absolutely sure about this? Testamentary changes are practically irreversible, especially in a family situation like this. Thomas, in 35 years of business, have you ever seen me make an important decision without thinking? I was calmer than I had ever been. Emily wants to treat me like I'm dead, so that's exactly what she's going to get. The current will left 60% of my assets to Emily, 20% to charity, and 20% to a grandchildren's education fund. A generous will made by a loving father who believed in family loyalty. I want to remove Emily completely, I continued. 0. Nothing. Not a single cent. Thomas stopped writing. Richard, this is going to create a catastrophic family war. Emily might contest it, claiming you were under emotional duress or weren't in full possession of your mental faculties. She's already trying to do that, I replied, telling him about Saturday's visit with the lawyer. The difference is that now I have a strategy. I explained my plan to Thomas. It was simple in its cruelty and elegant in its justice. Emily would be removed from the will, but the grandchildren would have a trust fund that could only be accessed when they turned 25, and only if they maintained regular contact with me until then. This will force Emily to choose between her pride and her children's financial future, Thomas observed. Very clever. There's more, I said, pulling out another document. I want to establish a charitable fund in Maria's name. Maria was my late wife, Emily's mother. 50% of all my assets will go into this fund. The goal is to help elderly parents who have been abandoned by their families. Thomas almost smiled. That's poetic, Richard, and completely cool. And there's a special clause, I continued. If Emily tries to contest the will claiming mental incapacity, she automatically forfeits any rights to the children's trust funds as well. Everything goes to charity. This is a perfect legal trap, Thomas admitted. If she accepts the will, she loses her inheritance, but the children are protected. If she contests it, she could destroy her own children's future. We spent 3 hours reviewing every detail, every legal possibility, every loophole Emily might try to exploit. When we finished, I had a document that was simultaneously my revenge and my protection. Now comes the fun part, I said to Thomas. I want you to send a copy of this will to Emily. Today. Richard, this will be like declaring war. Thomas, the war has already begun. Emily was the one who fired first when she called me toxic and brought a lawyer to my house. Now I'm just responding with the same energy. Thomas shook his head, but he was smiling. In 15 years representing my company, he had seen me negotiate with the sharks of Wall Street and come out victorious. He knew I didn't make decisions on impulse. There's one last thing, I said, taking a sealed envelope from my briefcase. I want you to keep this in your safe. It's a letter for Emily, to be delivered only after my death. What does the letter say? The truth. Everything I felt, everything she put me through, all the good memories she destroyed. I want her to know exactly what she lost when she chose money over her father. Thomas carefully held the envelope with the care of someone handling dynamite. This will devastate her, Richard. Well, I said, standing up and straightening my suit. Maybe she should have thought about that before she devastated me first. At 4:30 p.m. that Monday, Emily would receive a copy of the new will by courier, along with a letter explaining that her actions had permanent consequences. And then we would see who really needed whom in that family. The phone rang at 5:47 p.m. I was finishing dinner and watching the news when I saw Emily's name flashing on the screen. I let it ring 6 times before answering. You've completely lost your mind. Her voice was broken, hysterical. I could hear Jake saying something in the background, probably trying to calm her down. How could you do this to your own grandchildren? Emily, I said, cutting a piece of meat with deliberate calm. Speak more quietly. I'm having dinner. Dinner? She yelled. You just destroyed your grandchildren's future, and you're having dinner like nothing happened. Dad, you took everything from me. Everything. That's right, I confirmed. And that's exactly what you did to me at Christmas. The difference is that you did it out of disrespect. I did it out of justice. I heard her sobbing on the other end of the line. For a second, I almost felt sick. Almost. Then I remembered her face calling me toxic at my front door. Dad, please, her voice pleaded. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But this is disproportionate. You're punishing the children. Actually, Emily, I'm protecting the children, I replied. Their trust fund is secured until they're 25, as long as they maintain a relationship with me, of course. Forced relationship? You're using emotional blackmail. The irony was delicious. Emily, explain something to me. When you wanted my money but didn't want my presence, wasn't that emotional blackmail? Silence. Finally, Jake picked up the phone. Richard, let's be practical here, he said, trying to sound rational. Emily made a mistake. She acknowledges that. But removing her completely from the will is extreme. How about reducing her percentage? Say, 30% instead of 60%. Jake, you still don't understand, I said, feeling a calmness I hadn't felt in months. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't a mistake that can be fixed with apologies. Emily showed me exactly what she thinks of me. Now I'm showing her exactly what I think of it. But what about the children, Richard? Madison and Tyler are not to blame for their parents' mistakes. The children are protected, I repeated. As long as you don't destroy their relationship with me like you tried to do, the choice is yours. Emily returned to the phone, now with that manipulative voice she used when she really wanted something. Dad, I was pregnant and emotional. Hormones, you know. I wasn't thinking straight when I said those things. Emily, you planned to exclude me from Christmas. You brought a lawyer to my house. You tried to have me declared incompetent to manage my money. My voice was rising for the first time. This wasn't hormonal impulsiveness. This was a calculated plan. I never tried to declare you incompetent. What exactly does Diane Richardson specialize in? Silence again. Dad, Emily tried one last time. If you do this, you'll be alone. Completely alone. No family, no grandchildren, no one. Emily, I said, feeling a strange lightness. Being alone is exactly how I felt at Christmas when you left me outside the house I helped pay for. At least now my loneliness will be honest. You'll regret this, she said, her voice thick with venom. When you're old and sick, when you need care, when you need family, you'll remember this conversation. Emily, I replied, when I get old and sick, I'll hire people to take care of me. People who won't call me toxic while they spend my money. I hung up the phone and went back to my dinner. The meat was a little cold, but it was still good. Even better, I was eating in peace for the first time in years. Outside the window, snow was beginning to fall. Winter was approaching, but for the first time in a long time, I felt warm. 3 weeks later, on a gray Thursday in January, I was at the supermarket doing my shopping when something happened that completely changed the game. I was in the cereal aisle when I heard a familiar voice behind me. Richard! Richard Morrison! I turned to see Margaret Chen, an acquaintance from the church Maria and I had attended for over 20 years. Margaret had always been a bit of a gossip, but she was a good person. Next to her was her daughter Karen, who had been Emily's classmate in school. Margaret, how are you? I greeted, genuinely happy to see a friendly face. Richard, I need to ask you something, she said, with that look of someone dying to share a juicy piece of gossip. Is it true that Emily is saying you have Alzheimer's? My blood ran cold. What did you say? Karen stepped forward. Dad, she posted on Facebook asking for prayers for the family because the children's grandfather is experiencing age-related cognitive decline and they are struggling to find the best care for him. She what? My voice came out louder than I intended. Margaret pulled out her phone and showed it to me. There it was, on Emily's Facebook page. A 3-paragraph post talking about the challenges of dealing with an elderly father who is losing his mental faculties. She described how difficult it was to make financial decisions on behalf of someone who can no longer make rational judgments. The post had 47 comments, 47 people offering condolences, sharing similar stories, recommending specialized clinics. Emily had turned my sanity into a matter of collective prayer. Margaret, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I don't have Alzheimer's. I don't have cognitive decline. I have a lying daughter. Ah, Margaret sounded disappointed. Clearly she was expecting a dramatic story about a degenerative disease. But why would she say such a thing? Because I discovered she was trying to steal my inheritance, and I cut off the financial support I had been giving her for 10 years. Margaret's eyebrows rose so high they almost disappeared into her forehead. Stolen inheritance? There was my opportunity. For 20 years, Margaret Chen had been the unofficial communication network for our community. Whatever I told her would be public knowledge, within 48 hours. Margaret, can I tell you a story? We stood there in the cereal aisle for 20 minutes while I recounted everything. The $800,000 over 10 years, the exclusion from Christmas, the attempt to declare me incompetent, the lawyer's visit, the new will. Karen was recording on her cell phone. Richard, this is terrible. Margaret was genuinely shocked. Emily always seemed like such a sweet girl. Margaret, Emily is a sweet girl, for people who can do something for her. I paused. Do you know of any expensive nursing homes in the city? Because according to her post, I'm going to need one. Margaret laughed nervously. Richard, you're too good for a nursing home. Exactly, I said. Now explain to me why my daughter is telling everyone that I'm senile. When I left the supermarket, I knew the story was already spreading. In a small community like ours, lies about mental illness were serious, especially when they were obviously false. I got home and immediately called Thomas. Thomas, Emily is spreading rumors that I have Alzheimer's, publicly, on social media. Richard, that's slander. And considering she has a financial interest in declaring you incompetent, that's also evidence of bad faith. What can I do? We can sue for defamation and use that to strengthen our position that any attempt by her to contest the will is motivated by greed, not by genuine concern for her health. Do it, I said. But Thomas, I want something more. What? I want you to organize a lunch, church, community, people who have known our family for years. I want them to see with their own eyes whether I'm senile or not. Thomas was quiet for a moment. Richard, this is risky. If someone thinks you really have a problem. Thomas, I built a multi-million-dollar company, renovated a house, changed my will, and I'm suing my daughter for defamation. All in the last 3 weeks. I smiled. If this is dementia, I should have been sick a long time ago. The party was on Saturday, and Emily would discover that 2 people could play the public opinion game. Saturday arrived with a perfect blue sky and a temperature of 45 degrees, ideal for the meeting that would change everything. At 2 p.m., my house was full of 30 people who had known my family for decades. Pastors, neighbors, work colleagues, friends from Maria's time. I had spent the week preparing everything with the precision of a military operation. Organized documents, printed chronology of events, copies of Emily's Facebook posts, distributed as evidence. If she wanted to play the public opinion game, I was going to show her how it was done right. "Guys," I said, standing up to speak when everyone had finished lunch, "I called you here because I need your help to understand something. My daughter is telling everyone that I'm suffering from senile dementia. Do you think I look demented to you?" Nervous laughter filled the room. Margaret Chen, who had obviously spread the story as I had expected, looked embarrassed. "Richard," said Pastor Williams, "you seem more lucid today than I remember seeing you in recent years." "Exactly," I agreed. "Then help me understand why a daughter would invent a story about her own father's mental health." I distributed copies of the Facebook posts. The silence that followed was deafening as 30 people read the lies Emily had spread about me. "But why would she do that?" asked Dorothy Martinez, a friend of Maria's. "Let me tell you a story," I began, and spent the next hour recounting 10 years of financial exploitation, culminating in being excluded from Christmas and an attempt to take legal control of my assets. When I finished, the room was in absolute silence. "Emily received almost $1 million from me in 10 years, I concluded. When I found out she was planning to have me committed to a mental institution to take control of the inheritance, I cut off financial support. Now she's telling everyone I'm crazy." "Richard," said Frank Peterson, a retired businessman who had known me for 25 years, "that's the sanest thing I've ever seen you do." Several people laughed. The tension in the room was breaking. "But the children," said Sarah Johnson, "Madison and Tyler, they are not to blame for the problems between you adults." "Sarah, I completely agree," I replied. "That's why I set up trust funds for them. But I conditioned access on them maintaining a relationship with me. Because if Emily manages to portray me as crazy, she'll use that to keep me away from my grandchildren forever." "That makes sense," agreed Pastor Williams. "Richard, have you spoken directly with Emily about this situation?" "Pastor, I tried. But when you confront someone about lies, they tend to double down." I picked up my phone. "Want to see?" I dialed Emily's number right there on speakerphone so everyone could hear. "Dad? What do you want?" Her voice was cold, distant. "Emily, I'm here with some family friends. Pastor Williams, Margaret, and Dorothy. People who have known us for years." "And?" "They wanted to understand why you're telling everyone that I have Alzheimer's." Silence. Long. Awkward. "Emily," said Pastor Williams. "This is Pastor Williams. Are you there?" "Pastor," her voice immediately softened. It's a complicated situation. Dad is going through some problems and—" "Emily," I interrupted, "explain to me exactly what my neurological problem is. Which doctor diagnosed me? What tests confirmed it?" Another silence. "Dad, you're acting irrationally." "Emily," said Frank Peterson. "Is Frank? Richard seems quite rational to me. In fact, he explained the whole financial situation between you two very clearly and systematically." I could hear Emily breathing heavily on the other end of the line. "You don't understand," she finally said. "He's manipulating you like he always does. Dad, hang up the phone now." "Emily," I said calmly, "I'm going to hang up. But before I do, I want you to know that everyone here heard our conversation, and they've all known our family for decades. They can form their own opinions about who's being manipulative." I hung up the phone. The room erupted in conversation. Within 2 hours, 30 people had left my house with a completely different understanding of the situation. Margaret Chen, the biggest gossip in the community, left shaking her head. "Richard, I'm so sorry. Emily completely deceived us." And so the narrative changed. In one afternoon, I had transformed Emily from a worried daughter into a greedy daughter in the perception of our entire community. It was only the beginning. The next 2 weeks were like watching a house of cards collapse in slow motion. The story of our meeting spread through the city like wildfire, and each new person who heard about it added their own layer of judgment to Emily's behavior. The following Wednesday, I received an unexpected call from Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the children's pediatrician for the past 5 years. "Mr. Morrison, she said. I need to talk to you about a delicate situation involving Madison and Tyler. My blood ran cold. What happened to them? Nothing happened to them. But Emily contacted me yesterday asking me to sign a medical statement affirming that the children were being exposed to harmful psychological influences from their grandfather. What's that? She wanted medical documentation to justify cutting off contact between you and your grandchildren. She said you were exhibiting erratic and potentially dangerous behavior. Dr. Hendricks paused. Mr. Morrison, in 5 years of treating these children, they have never shown any sign of trauma or fear related to you. On the contrary, they always speak of their grandfather with great affection. And what did you say to Emily? She said I couldn't sign such a document without clinical evidence, and that if she was truly concerned about the children's safety, she should seek help from social services. Dr. Hendricks hesitated. Mr. Morrison, may I ask a personal question? Of course. Is there some financial problem between you two that might be motivating this behavior? And there it was. Even the children's pediatrician was connecting the dots. Emily had pushed so hard that now professionals who had nothing to do with our family were questioning her motives. On Friday, I received another enlightening call. It was Janet Wilson, the principal of the private school where Madison and Tyler studied. Mr. Morrison, Emily came here today trying to remove you from the list of people authorized to pick up the children. Janet had known our family for 3 years and had always had an excellent relationship with me. When I asked why, she said you were going through mental health issues. Janet, I can assure you that my mental health is excellent. I figured as much, she said. Mr. Morrison, in 3 years, I've never seen more stable and caring behavior than you have shown towards your grandchildren. But I need to warn you, Emily is being very insistent. She even suggested that I should call social services if I find out that you've had contact with the children. She's trying to use the school as an instrument of alienation, I said, finally understanding the scope of her plan. That's exactly how I interpreted it, Janet agreed. Mr. Morrison, may I suggest something? How about you schedule a formal visit here at the school? We can officially document that you are mentally competent and that the children are happy with your presence. We scheduled it for Monday, but what happened over the weekend changed everything again. Saturday morning, Jake called me. His voice was different, defeated, exhausted. Richard, can I talk to you? In person? Where is Emily? Emily is at her mother's house in Portland. She took the children. He paused for a long time. Richard, I think I made a terrible mistake. 2 hours later, Jake was sitting in my living room drinking coffee and making the confession I had been waiting months for. Richard, I let Emily convince me that you were becoming senile. She showed me messages of yours questioning our spending as evidence of paranoia. She painted your questions about money as an unhealthy obsession. He looked at his hands as he spoke. I wanted to believe her because it was easier than admitting that we were living way beyond our means with your money. Continue. But in the last few weeks, seeing how she reacted to the new will, seeing her lie to doctors and the school, pressuring everyone to confirm a narrative that clearly isn't true, Jake looked up. Richard, Emily isn't worried about her mental health. She's furious because she's lost control of the inheritance. And why are you telling me this? Because I have 2 children who love their grandfather, and because I don't want them to grow up thinking that the man who loves them was a danger to them. Jake took a deep breath. And because Emily is talking about moving permanently to Portland with the children, cutting all ties with Spokane. There it was. Emily's final plan, legally kidnapping my grandchildren. If she couldn't control my inheritance, she would control my access to the only family members I still loved. But Jake had just given me the weapon I needed to stop that.